to yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lofgren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was also able to visit the scene of the fire last week with my colleague, Mr. Ison Swalwell. It was just tragic. I mean, really, the devastation is hard to comprehend. And the people, thousands and thousands of people who lost everything, it's really tragic. We need to work together to make sure that we do our very best to prevent something like that from ever happening again. But I do think it's important that we have the facts in front of us. For example, under the state's leadership, the number of CAL FIRE personnel nearly doubled from 2019 to the present. The state has now invested $2 billion in managing and reducing fuel load in forests. And in fact, the prescribed fire activity has more than doubled from 2021 to 2023. So I'd like to ask unanimous consent to put a fact sheet into the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
I understand that the R Street has connections to there have been representatives from insurance companies, nothing illegal or wrong about that, but what's being proposed is really, in the insurance area, something that is, I don't think, workable. I mean, Florida tried it and didn't work. The premiums are 2.5 times as high in Florida as they are in California, and but there is a problem with insurance in California and across the United States that we don't have an answer to, and I would ask unanimous consent to put that information in the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
I would just like to know, looking at the mountains in back of the fire in Altadena, you talk about forest, that wasn't a forest. It was chaparral, it was scrub. And one of the things that happens in California is we go from, the rivers to the drought. In 2023, Los Angeles County got 200% of average rainfall. I mean, it just soaked the place. And the vegetation took off. The next year, 2024, was the second driest year in history in LA County. So all that vegetation that got, spurred by the rain dried to a tinder. It was a tinderbox. One of the things that the fire chief told us when we visited last week is they want to do prescribed burns when it's wet. It's just about to rain because they don't want, in New Mexico, they had a conflagration because a prescribed burn took off. It hasn't done that kind of rain in LA except for this week from last April. I mean, there was no rain at all. They couldn't do a prescribed burn in those hillsides. They're too steep to do, to put bulldozers in. That's impossible. So I'm just wondering, Mr. Prevost, I mean, as a fire chief, what do you do in a situation like that? I mean, I grew up with the mission that only you can prevent forest fires, right? Smokey the Bear told us that, and we didn't realize when we did that we were building up this fuel load that needed to, I mean, it's a tinderbox. It needs to be removed, but it's going to take a while to sort through the accumulation of that fire. What do you do in a situation like in Altadena where you have that chaparral, it's dry as a tinder, and it's not wet, you can't burn it? What do you do, Mr. Prevost?
This is why I keep coming back to we need to rethink the problem. This is not a wildfire problem. When we have embers that will travel miles, fire breaks won't accomplish what you're looking for. We will have fires and ignitions in the conditions we have now long before any of the policy discussions we're going to have, the current ones we're having, are going to have an effect. We must, as fast as possible, deal with the ignitability of the structures in these fire-dependent landscapes. If this is really about dropping losses of property and life in those settings, if that's what we're setting out to do, with laser focus, we have to mitigate those structures and do it at a density that will keep the structures from becoming the fuel type. You've heard it from everybody. Those conditions, you cannot stop the fire spread. Those conditions are going to get worse. They're not going to plateau. So this discussion about fire breaks and, and the idea of treating acres, millions of acres, we need to get there. But to your point, they're called prescribed fires for a reason. There's a prescription, which means there are parameters that you do them in. If you don't do them in the right way, you do have things like the Peshtigo fire or the Hermit's Peak fire. So we absolutely need to harden the structures first.
Gentlewoman